Reese Donovan became a rookie nurse in a forgotten rural ER tucked deep in the West Virginia mountains, the quietest way she could disappear after half her team didn't come home. But the black belt doctor who runs the night shift likes to pin women against the parking lot wall to remind them who owns the hospital, and nobody in that town knows her real name. On a storm-soaked night, a Navy helicopter sets down carrying a wounded operator she swore she'd never forget, and the past she tried to bury walks back in with blood up to its knees. The arrogant doctor is about to find out, the hardest way possible, why a lieutenant commander from DevGru wasn't discharged for being weak. She was discharged because nobody in the unit could stand training against her anymore. If Reese's story of buried scars and silent strength pulls you in, smash that like button before the storm hits. Drop a comment and tell me what city or country you're listening from. I want to see how far this one travels tonight. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and welcome to the channel, where ordinary uniforms hide extraordinary warriors. Stay with me until the very last line. The kind of justice you're about to witness doesn't happen twice. Smile when I'm talking to you, sweetheart. Dr. Brant Kessler said it loud enough that the entire nurses' station heard it. Reese Donovan didn't smile. She didn't look up. She just kept counting the gauze packets in the trauma cart, fingers moving in that slow rhythm she'd practiced for 8 months. 12, 13, 14. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside, rain hammered the metal roof of Holloway County General. Kessler leaned closer. He smelled like coffee and cheap aftershave and something rotten underneath. You know what I think your problem is, Donovan? Nobody ever taught you respect. You grew up soft. Reese set the gauze down. Will that be all, doctor? Her voice was small, tired. The voice of a woman who had learned that arguing only made things worse. Kessler smiled. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. 6'2", 220 pounds of mid-career arrogance. Brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, working toward black. A framed photo of him in a Ranger Regiment uniform hung in his office, even though everyone knew he'd washed out of selection in 2009. Parking lot tomorrow morning, Kessler said. 6 a.m. You missed last week's session. Reese's jaw tightened. The night staff was required to attend Kessler's so-called self-defense classes in the back lot before shift change. He'd made it not optional 6 months ago, after the new administrator backed him. Nurses came back with bruises on their forearms, their necks. 1 had quit. 2 had transferred. Nobody talked about it. I'll be there, she said. Good girl. He tapped her shoulder twice. His thumb pressed into the soft tissue above her clavicle harder than it needed to. She didn't move. He walked away, whistling. Behind him, Marisol from triage mouthed the word, sorry. Reese gave her the smallest shake of the head. Don't. The radio at the charge desk crackled. Holloway General. This is Mountain Med 12. We are 5 out with a stab wound to the chest. Male, late 40s. GCS 13. BP holding at 110/70. How copy? Mountain Med copy. Trauma 1, ready for you. Reese closed the trauma cart and rolled it into Bay 1. She moved without sound. 8 months of moving without sound. 8 months of being the small woman who got the worst assignments, the late shifts, the parking lot sessions. 8 months of swallowing it. The doors of Holloway County General opened 40 seconds later. A paramedic she didn't know wheeled in a stretcher with a man on it, soaked to the bone, with a kitchen knife handle still protruding from just below his left clavicle. Knife embedded, not removed in the field. Good crew. Reese's eyes did 3 things at once without her noticing. She measured the angle of the blade. The color of the man's skin registered next. Last came the position of the handle relative to the subclavian vein. None of these were things a rookie nurse should be doing. She filed it away. Dr. Kessler swept into the bay, pulling on gloves. Out of the way, Donovan! She stepped back against the wall. Kessler stood over the patient and barked orders. 2 large bore IVs. Oh, neg on standby. Get me a chest x-ray. The nurses moved. Reese moved too. Hands quick and quiet, threading an 18 gauge into the patient's right antecubital on the first try. The patient's eyes rolled toward her. He was conscious. Scared, he grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't pull it out," he whispered. He said, "Don't pull it out." "Sir, who said?" Reese asked softly. The man, on the phone. He said, "Don't pull it." The patient drifted. Reese leaned closer, her tactical brain firing patterns she'd told herself she didn't use anymore. Stab wound to the chest. Patient told not to remove the blade. That meant whoever stabbed him knew exactly what they were doing. Knew the knife was the only thing keeping a major vessel from blowing open. That wasn't a fight. That was a message. She glanced at his hands, calloused in specific places. Index finger, web of the thumb. Hands that had held a rifle for a long time. A thin chain around his neck, half tucked under his collar. The edge of 2 metal tags, dog tags. She straightened before anyone noticed her looking. Dr. Kessler. His hands. "He may be." "Did I ask for your assessment, Donovan? Get me the ultrasound. Now." Reese turned and walked to the supply alcove. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Her heart was hammering against her ribs in a rhythm she hadn't felt in 3 years. She rolled the portable ultrasound back into the bay. The patient's BP had dropped to 95/50. Kessler swore. "Where the hell is the surgical attending?" "Dr. Phelps is 40 minutes out, sir," the unit secretary called. "The bridge on Route 9 is washed out. He's coming the long way." Kessler's face flushed. Reese had seen that flush before, on men who were about to do something stupid because they couldn't admit they were out of their depth. The patient was crashing. He needed a surgeon. He didn't have one. Kessler was the only physician in the building, and Kessler had not performed an emergency thoracotomy since residency, and even then he had assisted, not led. Reese knew this because she had read his published case files when she vetted the hospital before taking the job. She had vetted everyone. Old habits. "Prep him for thoracotomy," Kessler said. Vera froze. "Doctor, are you sure that's—" "Prep him." His voice cracked on the second word. The patient's lips were turning the wrong color, and then the radio at the charge desk crackled again, much louder this time, a different frequency. A voice came through that didn't belong to county dispatch. The voice was clipped, military, and it said 3 words that froze every nurse in the hallway. "Holloway General, this is Nighthawk 2-3, U.S. Navy, declaring inbound emergency. We are 9 mics out with 2 critical. Repeat, 9 mics. Stand by for landing." Reese went still. Not the stillness of a frightened nurse. The other stillness. The one she had spent 8 months suppressing every time a door slammed too hard, every time someone yelled in the parking lot, every time a helicopter passed overhead going to the bigger hospital in Beckley. This one was not passing. Nighthawk, naval call sign, MH-60 Sierra, the troop transport. The one she had ridden out of a valley once with 2 men dead behind her, and her own blood pooling in the heel of her boot. Vera was staring at her. "Donovan, you okay?" "Fine." Reese reached up and tucked a stray piece of auburn hair behind her ear. Her fingers were steady. They were always steady when it mattered. That was the problem. Kessler whipped around at the charge desk. "Why is the Navy landing at my hospital?" "I don't know, Doctor." Pam, the unit secretary, was 62 and had seen everything Holloway County could throw at her. Pam was not unflappable now. "They said they tried to divert to the VA in Beckley, but the ceiling's too low. Storm pushed them in. We're the only ER with a helipad inside 30 miles. Kessler ran his hand through his hair. He looked at the stab wound patient on the table. He looked at the radio. He looked at Reese, who was the only person in the room not visibly panicking. His eyes narrowed. "Donovan, get up to the helipad and assist the crew when they land. You're not doing anything useful down here." "Yes, Doctor." She moved before he could change his mind. Through the swinging doors, down the corridor with its peeling green paint, past the chapel that nobody used, up the back stairwell, 2 flights, rubber soles silent on concrete. At the top, there was a steel door, a sign that said helipad access, and a wind howling on the other side that she could hear through the metal. Her hand went to the push bar. She paused. For half a second, she let herself think about the last helipad she had stood on. Bagram, October. The sky the color of a bruise. A crew chief named Cisneros, pressing his thumb hard into her shoulder seam and saying, "You did everything you could, Mom." She had not done everything she could. She had done what was possible. And what was possible had not been enough. The door opened. The wind hit her like a wall. Rain went sideways across the concrete, and the windsock had been pulled flat against its pole. The helipad lights painted a bright halogen circle on the wet pad. 2 sets of position lights to the southwest, low against the ridgeline. 1 main bird, 1 chase. Standard Navy posture. They flew in pairs. The lead bird was coming in fast, too fast for a casual emergency divert. Whatever was in the back of that helicopter was not going to wait. Reese knew that descent. She had felt that descent. The rotors hit her first, then the wash. Then the smell. JP5 fuel and hot metal and that specific scorched electronics smell that only came off a Navy bird running hard. The Nighthawk flared and set down. The side door slid open before the skids had fully settled. A man in a flight suit jumped out and ran toward her, one hand up against the rotor wash. He got to within 10 feet and stopped dead. Just stopped. Rain ran off the brim of his helmet into his beard. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Commander," he said. Reese did not move. The crew chief took another step forward. His face was the face of a man who had just seen a ghost on a concrete helipad in West Virginia at 1 in the morning. "Commander Donovan, ma'am?" The stairwell door behind her banged open. Kessler stood there in his white coat, soaked through in 3 seconds. He stopped when he saw the crew chief's face. The crew chief had not looked away from Reese. The crew chief had snapped to attention. In the middle of a rainstorm, on a hospital helipad in the West Virginia mountains, with a wounded sailor bleeding out in the bird behind him, a Navy air crewman was standing at attention in front of the rookie nurse Kessler had ordered to the parking lot at 6 a.m. "Ma'am," the crew chief said, his voice cracking through the wind, "we've got Petty Officer Vega in the back, femoral. He's been asking for you the whole flight, for 1 full heartbeat." "1." Reese stood in the rain and did nothing. Then she moved. The 8 months in Holloway County General fell off her shoulders like a wet coat. The slump went out of her spine. The auburn hair plastered against her cheek stopped mattering. Reese walked past the crew chief at a pace that was not quite a run and not quite a walk. The pace of someone who knew that panic burned fuel she could not afford. "Talk to me, Petty Officer," she said. "Nighthawk 2-3, sir. Ma'am. Chief Petty Officer Daryl Hannigan, aircrew, deployed out of Norfolk. Vega took a round through the left thigh 40 minutes ago during a training accident at the Sumter Range. Live fire drill went sideways. He's our corpsman, ma'am. He's the one who taught us all how to pack a wound, and he can't pack his own." Hannigan's voice broke on the last word. "Tourniquet on," Reese said. "High and tight, 8 minutes after the hit. Loosened once to check distal. Bleeding restarted. We retightened. He's been in and out since we lifted." "Crystalloid on board?" 2 liters of saline. We didn't have whole blood. The other bird had it and got grounded by the ceiling in Roanoke." "TXA?" "Yes, ma'am. 1 gram, IV, 20 minutes ago." "Good." She reached the open door of the helicopter and put her hand on the frame and looked inside. 2 men knelt on the deck. Between them, on the stretcher, Petty Officer First Class Eddie Vega lay with his eyes half closed and his BDU pants cut away to the hip. The tourniquet was where it should be. The bandage under it was soaked black. Reese knew that black. Black meant venous bleed that had been going long enough for the blood to lose its oxygen. The wound was high, too high for the tourniquet to fully control. The round had gone in just below the inguinal crease and exited out the back of the upper thigh, and somewhere in the middle of that path it had clipped the common femoral artery at the point where it splits off from the iliac. A junctional hemorrhage. Tourniquets don't seat there. You have to pack against bone. You have to know the bone is there. Vega's eyes drifted open. They focused on her. He smiled like a man seeing the moon come up after 3 days in the dark. "Boss," he whispered. Reese climbed into the helicopter. "Eddie." "Knew it was gonna be you. Told him the only nurse around here is... Stop talking. Save it for the bar later." "Yes, ma'am." His head fell back. Reese turned to the 2 crewmen on the deck, and her voice came out of a place she had buried in 2021. Not loud, just absolute. "I need him in the trauma bay in 90 seconds. You 2 carry the head. Hannigan, you carry the feet. Keep the leg elevated above the heart and do not flex the hip past 45 degrees or the packing shifts. Move." They moved. Kessler was still standing in the open stairwell door when she came past him pushing the stretcher. He started to say something. She looked at him. Just looked. Whatever he had been about to say died in his throat. They went down the stairs faster than was safe. Down the corridor. Through the swinging doors of the ER. Vera, the trauma nurse, took one look at the stretcher and the 4 men in flight suits and the soaked rookie who was suddenly issuing orders, and her training kicked in over her confusion. "Trauma 2 is open," Vera said. "Where do you want him?" "Trauma 2. Now. I need 2 units of O negative on the rapid infuser, a junctional tourniquet from the back of the green cart, combat gauze, hemostatic clamps, and a 14 blade. And get me a Foley catheter." A Foley. Trust me. Vera trusted her. Reese had never given Vera a reason to trust her, but Vera trusted her anyway. That happened sometimes. People could feel it. The transfer to the trauma table happened in one smooth motion. Reese was already cutting away the field dressing with trauma shears before the stretcher was fully out from under Vega. The wound packing came up wet. The smell hit. Iron and ammonia and that sour, sweet note of human meat that doesn't belong outside human skin. Vega's blood pressure was 82/40 and dropping. Kessler had finally caught up. He pushed into the bay. "Donovan, step back. I'm the attending physician. You'll lose him in 3 minutes if you do what you did with the stab wound." Reese did not look at him. Her hands were already inside the wound. 2 fingers. Finding the pulse of the artery, locating the proximal end of the bleed. "Get out of my light." "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out of my light, doctor." She still had not looked at him. The room had gone very quiet. The Navy crew was watching Kessler. Hannigan had one hand resting on the snap of a kid on his vest, in a way that was probably not conscious. Vera was watching Reese. Reese was watching the wound. "Combat gauze," Reese said. Vera slapped it into her gloved palm. Reese packed, tight. She put her shoulder into it. The combat gauze was Z-folded, kaolin impregnated, and it had to be pressed against the source vessel hard enough to fully oppose the bleed for 3 full minutes. She watched the clock on the wall. 3 minutes is a long time. 3 minutes with a man's life pumping under your knuckles is a longer time. Vega's breathing went shallow. "Stay with me, Eddie. Boss. Stay with me. Pacific City." His voice was almost gone. "You remember Pacific City?" "I remember. Good day. It was a good day." His eyes closed. She counted the 3 minutes by the second hand on the wall clock. When she released the pressure, the gauze did not float up on a fresh bleed. The packing was holding, but junctional was never that easy. The femoral was packed. The artery was momentarily contained. But she could feel, with 2 fingers, that the proximal stump was angry, and that any drop in pressure on the gauze would reopen it within 30 seconds. She needed the junctional tourniquet. And she needed to hold him until a vascular surgeon could clamp it surgically. Phelps was still 40 minutes out. There was no one else. "Junctional tourniquet," Reese said. Vera produced it. Reese set the strap above the wound, threaded the windlass, found the femoral pulse below the device. Wound, tightened, wound it again. The pulse below disappeared. The wound stopped weeping at the edges. Vega's BP, on the next cuff cycle, came up to 90/50. The room exhaled. Kessler had not moved from the doorway. His face had gone a color Reese did not have a word for. Reese stripped her bloody gloves and dropped them in the biohazard. Her hands were red to the wrists. She looked at Vera. "Page Phelps again. Tell him junctional bleed. Packed and held. Vitals stabilizing. Tell him to bring a vascular tray. Tell him if the bridge is out, he's getting in the back of a sheriff's truck. I don't care if he has to ride a horse." "Yes, ma'am." Vera was already on the phone. Reese turned and walked out of the bay. Hannigan followed her. So did Kessler. So did the two crewmen. So did Marisol, who had stuck her head out from triage and seen the whole thing through the open door. Reese walked to the staff bathroom, pushed the door open, walked to the sink, and scrubbed her hands while staring at her own reflection in the cracked mirror. The auburn hair was coming out of the bun. There was a streak of Vega's blood on her left cheekbone. Her eyes were green and tired and very, very clear. Behind her, in the open doorway, Kessler stood with his arms crossed and his face the color of bad meat. "Donovan," she rinsed. "Donovan, look at me when I'm talking to you." She dried her hands on a paper towel. She turned around. She was 5'2". He was 6'2". The doorway behind him was full of men in flight suits. Hannigan, the chief petty officer who had stood at attention in the rain, the two crewmen behind him. None of them moved. None of them said a word. They were just there. Witnesses. "You just performed a procedure outside the scope of your nursing license," Kessler said. "You are going to be terminated by morning. You are going to lose your license by next week, and you are going to be charged with practicing medicine without authorization." Reese folded the paper towel. She set it on the edge of the sink. "Dr. Kessler," she said. Her voice was no longer small. It was no longer tired. It was something else entirely. And Hannigan, in the doorway, closed his eyes for a moment, like a man hearing a song he had not heard in years. "You are correct that I performed a procedure outside the scope of an RN license. Then, I have a different license." Kessler's mouth opened. "I have a Special Operations Combat Medic certification from the Naval Special Warfare Center. I have an active Independent Duty Corpsman qualification. I have a Tactical Combat Casualty Care Instructor rating, current as of 14 months ago. The DoD recognizes those credentials in any emergency situation involving a service member. The DoD is going to ask you a lot of questions tomorrow about why you tried to perform a thoracotomy you have not been certified to perform since 2014. Hannigan let out a slow breath. "Who are you?" Kessler said. Reese did not answer him. She walked past him, out of the bathroom, down the corridor, back toward the trauma bay where Vega was still bleeding into a junctional tourniquet that she needed to monitor every 6 minutes. As she passed Hannigan in the doorway, she said very quietly, "How did you find me, Chief?" "Ma'am," Hannigan said just as quietly. "We didn't. He did." And he tipped his chin back toward the trauma bay. Toward Eddie Vega, who was unconscious now, but who had whispered her old call sign into a flight helmet 43 minutes ago when he thought he was about to die. Vera had the rapid infuser running by the time Reese came back into Trauma 2. Vega's color had started to come back. Not pink, never pink, not after that much blood loss, but the gray was lifting from his cheeks, and his lips were no longer the color of slate. The junctional tourniquet held. Reese checked it. Checked the dressing, checked the IV, checked the man's pupils. None of this required thought. Her hands did it on a loop she had run 600 times. While they worked, her mind walked through the rest of the room. Stab-wound patient still in Bay 1, vitals dropping, Kessler now somewhere behind her. Two crewmen in the corridor outside Trauma 2, blocking it without being told to block it. Hannigan in the bay with her, 10 feet back, parade rest. Kessler had walked off down the corridor in the direction of his office, so Kessler would have to wait. "Vera." "Yes?" "Pull a second peripheral, 18 gauge, left anticub. We're going to need it when Phelps gets here." "On it." "Hannigan." Hannigan straightened. "Ma'am." "Walk me through the training accident, the whole thing." "Ma'am." "The after-action brief is—" "I'm not asking for the brief. I'm asking what you saw." Hannigan glanced at Vega on the table. Hannigan glanced at the closed door. Hannigan stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Ma'am, the round didn't come from our line." Reese's hands kept moving. Her face did not move. "Say that again." "Round didn't come from our line. Came from the tree line on the east side of the range. Angle's wrong for a ricochet. The hole through Vega's leg is back to front. He was hit from behind, from outside the firing line. We told command. Command told us to fly him to the nearest trauma center and shut up about it. Then halfway here, Vega woke up and said..." Hannigan stopped. "Said what?" "Said find Dusty. That's the only thing he said. Ma'am, I served under Captain Reeves at Dam Neck. I know what Dusty meant. So I told the pilot to set us down at the closest pad on the route. We were supposed to go to Roanoke." Reese's hand paused over Vega's wrist. Dusty. She had not heard that name in 3 years. The pulse under her fingers was 110, thready but present. She kept her face still. "Where's the chase bird, Hannigan?" "Holding pattern 15 miles south, ma'am. They didn't want to land here if they didn't have to. Footprint, ma'am. We didn't want the footprint." "Smart. Who's on the chase bird?" "Lieutenant Marsh and a 4-man security element. Tell Marsh to set down on the helipad in 20 minutes and to bring his element inside. Quiet entry. Civilian clothes if they've got them, weapons concealed. I do not want a uniformed Navy security team walking into a county hospital tonight. We have at least one shooter who knows where Vega is, and we have a doctor in the building who is about to call somebody." Hannigan's mouth pulled into something that was almost a smile. "Yes, ma'am." He turned and stepped to the doorway and spoke into the throat mic clipped to his collar. Reese went back to her patient. The radio at the charge desk crackled to life. Pam answered it. "Yes, doctor. Yes, she's still in trauma too." "No, sir. Pam went quiet. Pam set the phone down and walked to the doorway of trauma 2 and made eye contact with Reese. Pam was a hard woman to spook. Pam was spooked. "Donovan, doctor." "Kessler is on the phone with the state nursing board," Pam said, "and the county sheriff, and the chief of staff. He's saying you assaulted him." Reese kept her hand on Vega's wrist. "Did I assault him?" "No, honey." "Then I assaulted him. I told them you saved a Navy SEAL's life." "Vega's not a SEAL, Pam. He's a corpsman attached to a SEAL team. There's a difference, but the difference doesn't matter to the news, so don't say SEAL out loud anywhere in this building tonight. Understand?" "Understood." Pam nodded once and walked back to her desk. Vera leaned in. "Reese," she said. It was the first time Vera had ever used the first name. "What is happening?" "A friend of mine got shot at a training range that wasn't supposed to have anyone shooting at him, Vera. And I'm an ER nurse with 8 months of seniority at Holloway County General. That's what I am tonight. That's what we're going to keep saying I am, for as long as we can keep saying it." Vera was quiet for a beat. Then Vera said, "Right." And Vera went back to setting the second IV. Outside the window of trauma 2, headlights moved in the parking lot. Reese could see them past the rain. A black SUV with no markings rolled in slow, stopped, killed its engine, then another, then a third. The third one was a county sheriff's cruiser. The first 2 were not. Hannigan saw it too. Hannigan moved to the window and watched. "Ma'am," he said, "that is not Marsh." "I know. Marsh isn't due for 19 more minutes." "I know." The SUVs sat in the rain with their lights off. Nobody got out. Reese pressed her lips into a line and turned back to Vega. She had 4 problems now. The first was a corpsman who needed a vascular surgeon. The second was a stab wound patient in Bay 1 who Kessler was about to kill. The third was at least one shooter who had hit Vega from the wrong side of the firing line. The fourth was a brown belt arrogant doctor who had called every authority in 3 counties before checking what kind of mistake he was making. 4 problems. She had handled 4 problems before. Phelps came through the doors of the ER at minute 37, younger than his voice on the radio, wet to the bone, carrying a vascular tray under one arm, because the sheriff had let him grab one from his bag before they ran from the cruiser to the door. He saw Reese standing at the head of Vega's bed, and he opened his mouth to argue with the rookie nurse in scrubs, and he saw her face and his mouth closed. Phelps had been an Army medic before med school. Phelps recognized the face. He did not know her, but he recognized the kind of face she was wearing. "Tell me what we've got," he said. "Junctional, common femoral, packed and held with combat gauze for 3 minutes. Junctional tourniquet seated at the inguinal crease. 2 units of O-neg in, TXA on board from the field. He needs a vascular clamp and primary repair. I can hold the field while you work. I have the surgical experience to second assist if you need it." Phelps blinked. "You can second assist?" "I can do the procedure if you can't get clean access. But I would prefer you do it because your license is intact and mine is complicated." Phelps stared at her for 1 full second. Then Phelps said, "Scrub in, Donovan." She scrubbed in. They worked. 26 minutes later, the femoral artery was clamped, debrided, repaired with a 5-nil Proline running suture, and the junctional tourniquet had come off. Vega's blood pressure was holding at 110/70. He would need transfer to a level 1 trauma center, but he would not die in Holloway County General. Reese stripped her gown. Phelps caught her eye. "What's your real name?" "Reese Donovan. That's the real name. The rank is what's complicated." Phelps nodded slowly. "Bay 1's still bleeding." "I know." "Kessler did the thoracotomy?" "He didn't get to. The Navy showed up first. He's been on the phone for the last 40 minutes. Then Bay 1 is dying." "I know," Reese said, and she walked out. The stab wound patient was alive, but not by much. Reese took one look at the monitor and ordered the ultrasound back and ran it across his chest herself, and saw exactly what she had expected to see. The knife had not nicked the subclavian artery. The knife was holding the subclavian artery, the way a thumb holds a leak in a hose. Whoever had stabbed this man had known precisely where to stop the blade, and had told him not to remove it, and had let him live, just barely, for a reason. Reese leaned down close to his ear. Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered. "I need you to tell me who you are. I need you to tell me who told you not to pull it out." His lips moved. She bent closer. "Tell Dusty," he whispered. "Tell Dusty they found her." The doors at the end of the corridor opened. 4 men in civilian clothes walked in from the parking lot, carrying themselves the way men carry themselves when they have rifles under their coats. They were not Marsh. They were not Navy. The lead man was tall, mid-40s, clean-shaven. He wore a black rain jacket over a flannel shirt, and his hands were in his pockets, and his right hand was not holding car keys. His 3 friends fanned out behind him in the muscle memory of men who had cleared rooms before. The lead man's eyes scanned the bays. His eyes found Reese. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had been hunting for a long time and had just spotted the deer. Hannigan was in trauma 2 with Vega. The crewmen were down the corridor. Phelps was scrubbing out. Vera was at the charge desk on the phone, her back to the door. Pam was 62 and unarmed. Reese counted the people in the room who could fight and got to 1. Herself. Her hand drifted slowly toward the open drawer of the Bay 1 cart, where a row of stainless steel instruments lay on a sterile blue field. She did not pick anything up. Her hand rested on the edge of the drawer. The radio at the charge desk crackled. Marsh's voice came through, calm and clipped and 3 minutes early. "Holloway General, Nighthawk 3-1, U.S. Navy, declaring inbound. 2 mics out. Request emergency landing." Pam reached for the radio without looking at it. The lead man in the rain jacket cocked his head, just slightly listening. His smile slipped 1 millimeter. He had not known about the chase bird. Reese let herself smile back at him for the first time. It was a very small smile. It was not friendly. "Sir," she said in her smallest rookie nurse voice, "are you here for a patient?" The lead man's smile came back. "We're here for you, ma'am." Reese took 1 slow step back from the Bay 1 cart. Her hand stayed on the drawer. The lead contractor walked into the middle of the corridor. His three friends fanned out behind him in the textbook spacing of a four-man entry team. Left wing 6 feet behind the lead. Right wing 6 feet behind. Tailman at the door, watching the parking lot. They had done this before. They had been paid to do this before. "Ma'am," the lead man said pleasantly, "we're going to need you to come with us. I'm not going anywhere." It wasn't a question. Reese's eyes flicked just once to the wall clock above the charge desk. Marsh was 2 minutes out. 2 minutes was an eternity in a corridor with 4 armed men in it. 2 minutes was also the rest of her life if she stood still. The lead man took another step toward her. His right hand came out of his jacket pocket. The grip of a SIG P320 cleared the fabric. He did not raise the muzzle. He was confident. He was confident because he had counted the staff in the ER and decided that none of them were a threat. He had counted wrong. "Pam," Reese said quietly, "go to triage. Take Marisol with you. Lock the door." Pam moved. 62 years old, and she moved like a woman 30 years younger. Marisol was already half out of her chair. "Vera, get behind the charge desk and stay down." Vera dropped. The lead man's smile flickered. "Ma'am, the more people you involve, the harder this gets for everyone." "You're right," Reese said, and she pulled the drawer all the way open. The lead man's eyes went to the drawer, because that's where a normal person's eyes would go. That was the mistake. Reese did not reach into the drawer. The drawer was a feint. Her right hand came up off the cart with the Bay 1 defibrillator paddle that had been resting at her hip the entire time, and she drove it forward and pressed the discharge button against the lead man's neck just below the angle of his jaw. 360 joules. Direct contact. The defibrillator was not on, technically, but a code blue paddle held against bare skin while charged delivers a current that does interesting things to a vagus nerve. The lead man's knees folded. The SIG went sideways into the wall. Reese caught the pistol on the way down and rotated it into a two-handed grip and put the front sight on the left wing's chest in the same continuous motion. "Hands!" Left wing froze. Right wing reached for his coat. "Hands!" Right wing did not stop reaching. Reese shot him once in the upper chest, center mass, 2 inches below the suprasternal notch. Subsonic round. Suppressor on the SIG. The sound was a soft, dry cough. Right wing folded sideways into the wall and went down. The pistol he had been reaching for hit the linoleum and skidded. Left wing's hands came up so fast he looked like a man surrendering to God. The tailman at the door turned and ran for the parking lot. Reese let him go. Reese did not have time for the tailman. The tailman was running outside, where Marsh and 4 sailors were currently landing on the helipad. Reese pivoted her aim back to left wing. "Down! Knees! Hands on your head! Cross your ankles! Now!" Left wing went down. He kept his hands flat on his head. He was breathing very fast. Reese stepped past the lead man who was on the floor twitching and kicked his pistol toward the Bay 1 wall. She kicked right wing's pistol the same way. She did this without taking her front sight off left wing. The whole thing had taken 11 seconds. Down the corridor, the stairwell door at the end opened. Lieutenant Marsh came through it with his rifle low ready and 3 sailors behind him. He took one look at the scene, the rookie nurse with a SIG pointed at a kneeling contractor, 2 bodies on the floor, the Bay 1 drawer hanging open, and he keyed his throat mic and said, "Birds secure. Buildings secure. Found her." Then Marsh looked at Reese, and his face did something complicated. "Ma'am." "Lieutenant. You good?" "I'm good. Right wing is KOA pending. Send a sailor to apply pressure. He might be usable for questions. Lead is alive, and you are going to want him alive for an hour and a half. Left wing is yours. Tailman went out the south door. You have someone on him?" "Petty Officer Riggs is in the parking lot. He'll have the tailman on the ground in 10 seconds. "Good." Reese lowered the SIG but did not put it down. Her hands had not shaken once. Her hands were not going to shake until she was alone in a bathroom 3 hours from now. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. Vera's head came up over the charge desk. "Holy shit," Vera said, very softly. Phelps came around the corner from the scrub room, still half in surgical greens, and stopped, and processed, and turned around and walked back into the scrub room without saying anything. That was the correct response from Phelps. Phelps was a good man. Marsh's sailors moved. One went to right wing with a trauma kit. 2 flex-cuffed the lead and the left wing. Marsh himself walked up to Reese and dropped his voice. "Commander, the chase bird picked up traffic from the contractor team's radio. They were calling for backup from a second element. ETA 20 minutes. We have to move you and Vega off the X. Vega is post-vascular repair. He can't move for at least 40 minutes. Then we hold here for 40 minutes and we move. Then we hold here for 40 minutes and we move," Reese agreed. She finally lowered the SIG the rest of the way and decocked it and set it on the cart. "Marsh, ma'am, who hired these men?" Marsh's jaw worked. "Ma'am, we don't have a confirmed answer. But the chase bird also picked up a call placed from inside this hospital 18 minutes ago to a number we have flagged. The call lasted 47 seconds. The number routes to a shell that traces to an organization Commander Reeves opened a file on in 2021. Reese closed her eyes for just 1 second. From which extension? "Office on the 2nd floor. Doctor's office. Name on the door is Kessler." Reese opened her eyes. "Of course it is." The Bay 1 stab wound. Patient groaned. Reese turned to him without missing a beat and walked back to his bedside and checked his vitals like she had not just shot a man in the chest 15 feet away. The patient's eyes focused on her. "Did they find me?" he whispered. "They found you. They didn't get you. Who are you?" "I'm the woman the man on the phone told you to ask for. You can call me Donovan. What's your name?" "Bishop. Hugh Bishop. Master Chief. Retired." Her hand stilled on his wrist. "Bishop, you were Reeves's senior chief." "Yes, ma'am." "He sent you to find me." "Yes, ma'am." "Who stabbed you?" "Same crew that just walked in. They thought they had me on the doorstep of your hospital. They knew you'd treat me. They wanted to use me to flush you. And the knife in your chest. His idea. Said keep it in, you'd recognize the work, you'd come find me before he did. Reeves said only Dusty would know what the knife meant." Reese exhaled. Slowly. Captain Joseph Reeves had been her commanding officer at Dam Neck for 4 years. Reeves had been the man who pinned her 04 on her shoulders in 2020. Reeves had been the man who had told her, in 2022, with tears in his eyes, that he did not allow himself to show in front of any other officer, that she was discharging at the wrong time for the wrong reason, and that he understood why she had to. Reeves had been the man who, 18 months ago, started a personal investigation into the contractor network that had set up the ambush that killed half of her assault element. Reeves had been the man who, 3 months ago, stopped returning her annual Christmas voicemail. Reese had assumed Reeves had finally gotten tired of leaving messages with a ghost. Reese had been wrong. "Where is Reeves now, Master Chief?" she said. Bishop's eyes drifted. He fought them back. "He's 3 hours behind me. He's driving in from Norfolk in a civilian truck because he didn't trust the air corridor. He told me if anything happened to me, to tell you the file is in the spare tire well of his Bronco and the password is the dog's name. Cooper." "Yes, ma'am." Bishop's lips lifted at the corner. "He said you'd remember the dog." Reese closed her eyes again, just for 1 second. Then she opened them and turned to Marsh. "I need a secure line. I need it now. And I need to have a conversation with Dr. Kessler before the FBI gets here, which will be in approximately 45 minutes, and I need the conversation to be on the record." Marsh's mouth twitched. "Yes, ma'am." Reese took 1 step toward the corridor. Hannigan was standing at the doorway of Trauma 2. Hannigan had drawn his sidearm at some point in the last 11 seconds, and now Hannigan was holstering it again. Hannigan said, very quietly, "Ma'am, Vega's awake. He's asking for you." "On my way." Reese walked down the corridor toward Trauma 2. As she passed the lead contractor, who was being flex-cuffed by a sailor on the floor, she stopped. She looked down at him. The lead man's eyes were finally focusing again. "Who hired you?" Reese said. The lead man smiled up at her. His teeth were red. "Hired ourselves, sweetheart. You took something from us a long time ago. We came to take it back." "What did I take from you?" "Aleppo. 19 of ours." Reese stared at him for a long beat. Then she said, 19 of yours killed 4 of mine, including a corpsman named Salazar who was 24 years old. So the math doesn't pay you back. It just opens the account further." She started to walk away. The lead contractor laughed. It came out wet. "Doesn't matter what the math is, Dusty. We're not the last car in this train." Reese kept walking. Through the doorway of Trauma 2, Vega looked up at her from the bed. Vega's eyes were clear now. Vega's hand came up off the blanket, weak, and Reese took it and held it without thinking. "Boss," Vega said. "Eddie. Reeves is coming." "I know. He brought the file." "I know that too." Vega closed his eyes. Good. Now we finish it." And Kessler's office was on the second floor, end of the hall, behind a frosted glass door with his name in black vinyl letters. Reese walked up to it with Marsh and one sailor behind her. She did not knock. She pushed the door open. Kessler was at his desk. His phone was off the cradle, pressed against his ear. He saw her and his eyes went wide and his free hand came up off the desk and reached toward the top drawer of the desk, and Marsh's sailor cleared his sidearm in a fluid motion that took less than a heartbeat. "Hand off the drawer, Doctor." Kessler froze. He put the phone down very slowly. The sailor reached across the desk and opened the drawer with 2 fingers and lifted out a snub-nose .38 by the barrel and set it on the bookshelf out of reach. Kessler swallowed. "I want a lawyer." "I'm sure you do," Reese said. She walked to the chair on the visitor side of his desk and sat down, crossed her legs at the ankle, folded her hands in her lap. Her voice stayed at a normal volume. It did not need to do more than that. "Dr. Kessler, you called a man in Reston, Virginia, 18 minutes ago. The number belongs to a private military contracting firm that, by happy coincidence, sent 4 armed men into my emergency department a few minutes after your call ended. 2 of those men are in custody. 1 is on his way to the morgue. The 4th was apprehended in the parking lot. I have a witness chain, a phone record, and a recording of your call. You are not getting a lawyer for at least an hour, because Lieutenant Marsh is exercising naval jurisdiction over a national security matter, and you are the inside contact. Are you tracking?" Kessler's mouth opened, closed, opened. I don't know what you're... I'm going to ask you one question. The answer is going to determine whether you go to a federal prison in Petersburg for the next 20 years or a federal prison in Florence for the next 40. Reese leaned forward 2 inches. "Who told you to flag me?" Kessler looked at the door. He looked at the .38 on the bookshelf. He looked at Marsh, who was wearing flight gear and a flat expression, and at the sailor, who was black and built like a power lifter and had not blinked in 90 seconds. Kessler's shoulders dropped. 6 months ago, he said, a man came to my house, said he worked for a security consulting firm. He showed me a photograph of a woman who used to be a Navy officer. Said she might be working at a hospital in West Virginia, that if she ever showed up at Holloway, he wanted to know. He gave me a number, said he'd pay $50,000 for a positive ID and another $250 if I could keep her in the building when the time came. And the parking lot? What? The self-defense sessions, the bruises, the harassment. Kessler's face turned a color that was not quite human. That was you keeping her in the building. Reese's voice was very, very quiet. You set up a system where you could put your hands on female staff every morning, in case one morning the female staff was me. So you could get a positive ID by feeling for the scars under my scrubs. Yes or no, doctor? Yes. How many other women did you hurt to find me? Kessler did not answer. Reese stood up. She walked around the side of the desk. Kessler shrank into the chair. Reese leaned down and put her hand flat on the desk next to his elbow. and she put her face 6 inches from his face, and she said, in the smallest of all her voices, "Dr. Kessler, I am going to give you a piece of advice. Tomorrow morning, when you are in federal custody and the agents are asking you questions, you are going to answer every single one. You are going to do this because the women you hurt in this hospital are going to file complaints, and those complaints are going to land in front of a grand jury, and the federal charges are going to be the easy part of your week. Are you tracking?" "Yes." "Good." She walked to the door. As she passed the sailor, she said, "No lawyer until after the FBI lands. Water if he asks. Bathroom if he asks. No phone." "Yes, ma'am." She walked out. Marsh followed her. In the hallway, Marsh said, "Ma'am, the morning sessions, the bruises, were you?" "Yes, Marsh." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was trying to disappear." And a 5'2" nurse who breaks a 6'2" brown belt's elbow in the back parking lot of a county hospital does not disappear. I was going to keep eating it until I could transfer out. 6 more weeks. I had the transfer paperwork in my locker. Marsh was quiet. Then Marsh said, "Permission to speak, ma'am." "Granted. I have served under 3 female officers in 12 years. I have served under 14 male officers. You are the most disciplined officer I have ever served under, and I have wanted to tell you that since the day you signed out of Dam Neck. I am sorry you spent 8 months letting a man like that put his hands on you. We are here now." Reese did not look at him. She nodded once. They walked the rest of the way to the stairwell in silence. Down in the ER, Phelps had stabilized the stab wound patient. The contractor with the chest wound was alive and angry and being prepped for transport. The lead contractor was in the corner of Bay 3 with a sailor standing over him and a flex cuff on each wrist. Marisol and Pam had come out of triage. Vera was at her station, eyes red but hands working, restocking the cart Reese had emptied during the takedown. The whole ER smelled like ammonia and burned electronics, and blood that had been mopped but not fully cleaned. Reese stood in the middle of the corridor and breathed. Hannigan came up beside her. "Ma'am, the chase bird picked up a vehicle approaching from the east. Civilian pickup, single occupant, older male. He's flashing his lights in groups of 3. Reese closed her eyes. 3 short, 3 short, 3 short. "Yes, ma'am." "Let him in. Have a sailor meet him at the south door." "Yes, ma'am." Hannigan keyed his throat mic. Reese walked to the south door of the ER. The rain had not let up. The windsock on the helipad above was still flat against its pole. A blue 1998 Ford Bronco rolled into the lot, slow, headlights cutting through the silver curtain of rain. The Bronco stopped 20 feet from the door. The driver's door opened. A man got out, 64 years old, white hair cut short, 6'1", 200 pounds, a body that had been an athlete's once and was now mostly memory and discipline. He wore a civilian jacket over a flannel shirt and jeans and rubber-soled boots. He stood in the rain and looked at Reese through the glass door. Reese pushed the door open and walked out. Captain Joseph Reeves did not move. The rain ran down his face. His eyes did not leave hers. "Commander." "Captain, I owe you a phone call." "You owe me 3 Christmases, sir." "I owe you more than that." His voice did not break. His voice was an old voice that had learned how not to break. "I was building the file. I didn't want to call you until I had it. I thought I had more time. Bishop got hit a day ahead of schedule. I got in the truck 4 hours after that. I am sorry it took this long. I am sorry it took Vega bleeding in your hospital. I am sorry, Reese." She walked the last 10 feet through the rain, and she put her arms around his shoulders, and she stood there with her cheek pressed against his shoulder for 10 full seconds. Reeves did not move. Reeves did not lift his arms. Reeves did not make a sound. He just stood there in the rain and let her hold him. When she stepped back, the rain on her face was not all rain. "The file?" she said. "Spare tire well, hard drive, Cooper's collar tag in the case. The password is the dog's name plus the month he died. August." "Yes." Reese nodded once. She turned. She walked back to the building. Reeves came with her. As they passed the threshold of the ER, Reeves stopped and looked at the bay where the lead contractor sat flex-cuffed, and Reeves's face went still in a way that Reese remembered from briefings before bad nights. "That him?" Reeves said. "That's the lead. The network behind him?" "Aleppo. Same crew, same money. They've been hunting me for 19 months. They got close once last year. I moved here after that. I thought I'd lost them. You didn't lose them. They lost you for a while. And then a doctor in West Virginia sold you for 50 grand. "Yes, sir." Reeves nodded. He turned to Marsh. "Lieutenant, where is the doctor?" "Second floor, sir. My sailor's on him." "Good." Reeves walked toward the stairwell. Reese put a hand on his arm. "Sir, he's mine." Reeves looked at her. Reeves looked at her for a long moment. Then Reeves smiled, and it was the smile she had not seen in 3 years, and he said, "Yes, he is. Carry on, Commander." Reese walked to the stairwell. Each step was the same step. Up 2 flights, right turn, down the hall to the office with the black vinyl letters. The sailor outside Kessler's door stepped aside without a word. Reese went in alone. Kessler was where she had left him. The .38 was still on the bookshelf. The phone was on the floor where the sailor had set it down. Kessler looked up. His face had aged 10 years in 20 minutes. "Donovan, Stand up, doctor." He stood. He was shaking. The man who had pinned women to the parking lot wall every morning for 6 months was standing in front of a 5'2" nurse, shaking. "Hold out your hand." He held out his hand. There was no hit. There was no touch. She took the framed photograph of him in the Ranger Regiment uniform off the wall behind his desk, and she put it face down on the desk between them, and she said, "You were never one of us. Not the Rangers, not the Navy, not the brotherhood you tried to buy your way into by hurting women in a parking lot. Tomorrow morning you are going to be processed by federal agents, and you are going to spend the next 20 years thinking about every nurse you laid hands on in this hospital. And when you get out, you are going to be a 60-year-old man with no license and no friends. And the women you hurt are going to be the doctors and the chiefs and the directors of every hospital in 3 states. They will remember your name. You will not be allowed inside any of those buildings. That is your sentence. The federal time is just the down payment." She turned. She walked out. She closed the door behind her with a soft, deliberate click. The FBI landed at 4:17 in the morning. 3 vehicles up the access road, headlights on, no sirens. Special Agent Aileen Ortiz came in first, badge out, with the patient calm of a woman who had been doing this for 22 years and was never going to be impressed again by anything. Reese met her at the door. Ortiz did not ask for an introduction. Ortiz had been briefed in the air. "Commander Donovan." "Special Agent." "Walk me through it." Reese walked her through it. Took 11 minutes. Ortiz did not interrupt once. When Reese finished, Ortiz nodded and said, "Dr. Kessler is upstairs. 2nd floor, sailor on the door. Mr. Bishop?" "Stable. Going to need a thoracic surgeon in Roanoke when the weather clears, but he'll live." Petty Officer Vega. "Stable. Vascular repair held. Transferring at first light to Walter Reed." "Lead contractor?" "Cooperating. He gave us the 2nd element ETA and the staging location before Lieutenant Marsh had to ask him twice. He's afraid of what comes next, more than he's afraid of you." "Smart man." Ortiz smiled, just barely. "Captain Reeves?" "In the trauma bay holding Bishop's hand." Ortiz nodded again. She gestured at one of her agents, who peeled off and went upstairs. She gestured at another, who went to Bay 3 for the lead contractor. 2 more set up at the front and side doors. The FBI did this kind of thing very well. They did it like it was the only thing in the world they did, because tonight it was. Ortiz turned back to Reese. "Commander, I want to say something off the record. May I?" "Yes." "I have been investigating the network behind the Aleppo crew for 3 years. I have lost 2 colleagues. I have not been able to break it. The file Captain Reeves built and just put in the back of my truck is the first complete picture of the financial chain I have ever seen. You disappearing for 3 years is what kept that file safe. Reeves needed time to build it without them knowing. You bought him that time by living in a 1-bedroom apartment in West Virginia and eating peanut butter out of a jar. I want you to understand that. The disappearing was not surrender. The disappearing was the operation. Do you copy? Reese did not say anything for a beat. Then she said, I copy, Special Agent. Good. Ortiz held out her hand. Reese shook it. I'll need a formal statement in the morning. Get some sleep first. You look like hell. Yes, ma'am. Ortiz walked away into the building. Reese stood by the door and watched her go and let her shoulders drop, just 1 inch, just for 1 second. Vera came up beside her. Vera was holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Vera handed one to Reese without saying anything. They stood together in the doorway and drank bad hospital coffee and watched the rain start to ease. After a while, Vera said, Are you going to stay? At the hospital? No. They're going to need a new physician for the night shift. They're going to need a new charge nurse too, probably. Because Marisol is going to file, and the administrator is going to have a very bad week. I meant, are you going to stay? In nursing? Reese took a long sip of her coffee. The coffee was terrible. The coffee was perfect. Captain Reeves came down here for 2 reasons. The first was to give Ortiz the file. The second was to ask me to come back, not to the teams. Past that now. He wants me to build a curriculum at the Naval Special Warfare Center for Tactical Medicine. He wants me to teach corpsmen and SEAL operators what I learned in Aleppo and what I learned in the 8 months I worked at a county hospital in West Virginia. He wants me to teach them that a junctional bleed under a fluorescent light with no whole blood and a brown belt doctor screaming at you is the same problem as a junctional bleed in a valley with the sun going down. He says nobody else has done both jobs. He's probably right. Vera was quiet. I'm going to do it, Vera. I'm going to take the job. I'm going to leave Holloway County in 3 weeks after the federal stuff is done and the women here are taken care of. I'm sorry to leave you with the mess. I'm not sorry I came here. You're not sorry? Vera. 6 months ago, a young nurse named Marisol got a bruise on her wrist that she could not tell her mother about. Tonight, that young nurse is going to be in front of a federal grand jury, and she is going to be a witness against the man who put that bruise on her, and she is going to be safe. That happens because I came here. I needed to know that disappearing didn't make me a coward. I needed to find out by accident. I found out by accident. Vera nodded slowly. Vera was crying. Vera did not bother to wipe at it. Reese! Yeah. Will you teach me? Reese looked at her. Teach you what? Some of it. Not the shooting. The other parts. How to stand the way you stood, the night they came in. How to talk the way you talked. I don't want what he did to ever happen again on my shift. And I want to know how to be the kind of nurse who could stop it. Reese took another sip of her coffee. Her mind went to Marisol with the bruise on her wrist, then to a young corpsman named Salazar who had been 24 years old and had never gotten old, then to a young Navy lieutenant named Reese Donovan who, 12 years ago, had sat in a classroom at Camp Lejeune and listened to a senior chief named Bishop tell her that the only thing that mattered in this work was that the next person down the line was better trained than you. Yes, Vera, I'll teach you. Before I leave, I'll teach you, and I'll come back here every quarter and I'll teach the night shift. We're going to start a program, you and me. We're going to call it something boring on the org chart so nobody complicates it. It's going to teach every nurse in this hospital how to stand the way I stood. Deal? Deal. They drank their coffee. The rain stopped at 4:51 a.m. The sun came up at 6:38, gray and pale through the cloud cover. Reese walked outside to the back parking lot. The asphalt was still wet. The yellow lines were faded. There was a chain-link fence at the far edge, and beyond the fence, the West Virginia mountains rose up green and quiet, draped in fog. The same parking lot where Kessler had pinned Marisol against the wall. The same parking lot where Kessler had pressed his thumb into Reese's clavicle every Monday at 6 a.m. for 6 months. Reese stood in the middle of it and did not feel anything except a kind of tired peace. Behind her, Vega rolled out of the ER on a gurney toward the Nighthawk, which had been refueled and was waiting on the helipad. Hannigan walked beside the gurney. Marsh walked behind it. Reeves walked beside Reese. "Commander, Captain, you ready to come home?" "3 weeks, sir. I have things to finish here." "3 weeks." Reeves looked at her. Reeves looked at her with the look he had worn when he pinned her 04 on her shoulders in 2020. "I never asked you why you picked Holloway County. Why this hospital?" Reese watched the gurney move across the wet asphalt. "Because Reeves," she said, "I read the Joint Commission report. This hospital had the worst patient outcomes in the state. I thought if I was going to disappear, I might as well be useful while I disappeared. I thought I could help." "Did you help, Commander?" Reese turned and looked at the back door of the ER, where Vera was watching her from the doorway, and Marisol was standing next to Vera with her arms folded across her chest, and Pam was behind them with her hand on Marisol's shoulder. "Yes, sir," Reese said. "I think I did." Reeves smiled. "Then you didn't disappear. You just changed uniforms." Reese laughed. It was a small laugh. It was the first laugh she had laughed in 3 years that didn't taste like ash. The Nighthawk's rotors spun up. Vega's gurney was loaded. The bird lifted off in a clean column of mist. Reese watched it climb until it cleared the ridgeline and turned east. Then, she walked back inside her hospital. Her scrubs were stained. Her bun was half down. Her left cheek had a streak of Vega's blood on it that she had not bothered to wipe off because washing it off felt like cheating. She walked past Marisol, who said nothing, and Pam, who said nothing, and Vera, who held out a fresh cup of coffee. Reese took the coffee. Reese said, "Vera, pull the morning census. We have patients to see." "Yes, Commander," Vera said. And the small, dark-eyed nurse from triage, Marisol, smiled for the first time in 6 months. The lesson of a uniform is not what it says on the patch. The lesson of a uniform is what you do for the next person down the line. Reese Donovan had worn 3 uniforms in her life: a Navy officer's, a nurse's, and the one she had not known she was wearing, the one that mattered most, the one a woman puts on when she stops running and decides, in a back parking lot in West Virginia, to teach the next nurse how to stand the way she stood. The end. If Reese's story moved you tonight, do me one favor before you sleep. Drop that like button, leave a comment telling me which line hit you hardest, and hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for staying with me until the very last word.